Beneficial and harmful stress effects. If you have a brief experience of stress, it can be beneficial. It can help. That stressful instance can actually ramp up your immune response so that over the long term you're less likely to become sick from a cold or the flu or whatever's going around. It helps to motivate you to action. You know, if you have what we call acute stress experience, it may be enough to startle you into action so that you go help the person who fell down, or block the toddler from running into the street or whatever. It also can focus your priorities. So I was coming home from school one day and somebody spun out on the on-ramp to the freeway because I live in the Seattle area and it's always raining. And so somebody spun out on the on-ramp to the freeway and they were completely perpendicular to the lane of traffic. So as I came onto the on-ramp, which is a long curving on-ramp, so I didn't see her, and I'm going like 50. I come around the corner and there she is, blocking the lane. Have to hit my brakes. And what's funny is as I was driving, I'd been eating a stick of cheese and some crackers, and when I saw what was coming up and I knew I needed both hands on the steering wheel, I must have just flung the contents of my hands. I don't remember doing it at all. My priorities got focused on controlling my car. And so once it was all over with, and then I was fine, everything, I avoided hitting her. Thank you, anti-lock brakes. Once everything was fine, and I start driving again, I realize my crackers have flung into the little cavity where the speedometer and stuff is inside my steering wheel. I don't know where my stick of cheese landed. Everything, I had flung everything. My priority was not preserving my snack at that time. My priority was controlling my car, and that's what stress can do for you. Sometimes you do behaviors and aren't even aware of it, right? Because you're focused. You can feel completely engaged in something when it's just the right amount of a stressor for you. Certain tasks are just that perfect amount of stress so that you feel completely engaged, you feel completely energized by the situation, you feel satisfied with what you're doing because it's just that perfect balance. Stress can also give us those little challenges that allow us to look back later and say, how did I handle it? How could I have handled it better? So that we can grow and become better, more highly functioning adults, right? Individuals who are learning to cope with stress, right? Gives us knowledge about situations and about ourselves. If we handle the situation well, it helps to build our self-esteem. If we handle it poorly, it might make us think, wow, I don't handle those kinds of situations very well, and can lower our self-esteem. But stressful events can be really helpful. It's when you're undergoing extreme stress or prolonged stress that we start to see really the health-related problems and the psychological issues. Our mental and physical coping systems become overwhelmed when we're under prolonged stress or really extreme stress. And so what happens is you start to feel like, I don't have what it takes to cope with this stressor, and we start to feel defeated. We start losing our energy. We start losing our feelings of engagement and satisfaction. Instead, start to feel like, what's the point of even trying? This stressor just continues to be here. That's with my daughter's feeling of stress with regard to her schoolwork. I was telling her, this is the part that makes it hard to keep going to school. This is why so many people drop out. It's like she feels like if she can get over this set of stressors that she's dealing with right now, that it'll be easier after those deadlines have passed. Except for after those deadlines pass, there's just the next set that's going to be looming for the next part of the quarter. Sometimes it makes you want to give up, and sometimes students do, they quit. But if you can figure out some way to look at the quarters in chunks, or look at one of the things I told myself by senior year, I was ready to go, oh my gosh, why am I doing this? One of the things I told myself is I can do anything for 10 weeks, just keep pedaling, and then you can completely relax over the break, right? There's always a break. So just keep pedaling, just keep pedaling. I was working 30 hours a week as a waitress and going to school full time and commuting 20 miles each way to get to campus. And so believe me, I understand the stressors of being an undergraduate for sure. And So I just told myself anything for 10 weeks. You can do anything for 10 weeks. If you want to quit, you can do it next quarter, but you're in here, you paid for it, get it done, right? That's what I always like to tell students, just you're in it, get it done. If you're under extreme or prolonged stress, that can interfere with your immune system functioning, and other health factors start to come into play if you're under prolonged stress. You may relate to this. Immune functioning issue, because a lot of times this, just sort of keeping pedaling for 10 weeks, your body being under this kind of stress, your mind being under this kind of stress, by the end of the quarter, all of a sudden, you're starting to get sick. If you're like me, I always get sick on the breaks. I hold it together, and then Friday of the beginning of the break, that's it, I'm sick. I have a cold, I have the flu, I have something that starts off the quarter, the break. So we may have a 2-week break, and I get to spend a week of it sick, and I get to spend the second week prepping for the next quarter. So I always, believe me, I understand the stress we're all under, right? But immune functioning can be hindered by prolonged stress. The key factor is whether you get a chance for recovering or healing. There have been a lot of studies, for example, one that showed the benefits of just getting one night of complete rest when you've been under a chronic stressor, and you've been deprived of sleep chronically because of it. If you can just get one solid night of sleep where you can sleep as long as your body wants to, that can help to rejuvenate you and get you ready to face the stressor again. Just having, a little break from whatever the stressor is. It could be a weekend off when you're the caregiver for somebody who has Alzheimer's or something. One little break where you literally can relax because you trust who's in charge that you left behind, and you get like a day or 2 days. For a lot of moms who are under chronic stress, because, moms are never off duty, and so moms who are under chronic stress, it's sad, but all we take is a couple of hours to rejuvenate. You know what I mean? Most moms, if they could just, I was just talking to one yesterday who said, I've discovered that the one place where no one expects anything from me is the gym. So she goes to the gym and does only what she feels like doing and what she finds satisfying, and she says, I leave my cell phone in the locker room and I just do whatever I want for an hour, and I feel better after. I feel like a rebellious child who got my way. I got to do what I want. She goes, I used to hate those people who said that they loved the gym, but now I'm like, it's where I go and hide. So, I mean, having a little opportunity to recover and to sort of heal a little bit will let you face the stressor with more, confidence and power later. Okay, so I already mentioned that stressors are the events and conditions that can trigger our stress response. They are more likely to trigger that stress response because we make the perception, the appraisal, that whatever the situation is challenging, it's threatening, it's harmful. There might be a spectrum of the levels of intensity and persistence of stressors. So we can see our stressors as falling into one of these categories. We have catastrophes. Catastrophes are an interesting case because they happen to the whole community. A hurricane hits, and everybody in that community was involved. At the time, of course, it's acutely stressful. It's, at the time to be, life or death situation, a hurricane's hitting, right? Once you survive and you see all the devastation and your house is washed away or whatever, acutely stressful, right? These are stressful events. But one of the benefits that catastrophes have is that usually assistance comes in. Red Cross shows up. Counselors show up. People show up to give assistance as needed. So in a certain way, catastrophes are more recoverable than some of the other categories I'm going to talk about. So significant life changes. This is one where a lot of times people think that significant life changes that would be stressful would always have to be negative ones, like the death of a loved one or a divorce in the family. But any significant life change is stressful. It is fraught with the potential for stress because the birth of a new baby. You're happy. Yay, look at the new baby. It's so sweet and cute, and I love the new baby, except for that it's keeping me up all the time. And this is stressful, having your sleep interrupted. The lifestyle change that goes along with having a new baby, especially, if it's a first one, complete shock how much it changes your life. The second one, now you have to balance two little creatures who are completely self-centered and want their needs met at any given time, and you know, it's stressful. So it's a joyful thing, yet it's also stressful. One that you guys are probably looking forward to, graduation. That seems like an awesome stress reliever, right? But it's a significant life change. If you've spent, you know, years with the identity of student, or you know, person who works and goes to school, or a person who works and goes to school and has a family, or has a family and goes to, right? You got like these multiple identities, and then one of those identities is gone. Part of the structure of your life is gone. It actually can be stressful. And so even though it's a positive change and it's something that you're probably looking forward to, it also brings with it the potential for stress. Okay, now we're starting to really get to it though. The things that really are most likely to create health-related problems are just like chronic daily hassles. The stuff that you just have to deal with that's not that big of a deal, but it's annoying. It just sort of makes it harder to get through life when these little hassles are there, like traffic, or having to stand in line at school to get your financial aid check, or having to file a, you know, what do you call it when you've been told no about something, and so you have to go to the trouble of trying to make the case that you deserve whatever you had asked for, like health insurance denied some kind of treatment, and you're like, no, I need you to do this, and so you have to go to the trouble of trying to make your case. These little daily hassles, these are the kinds of things that can really accumulate on us, and across time cause some pretty significant physical symptoms. The text focuses on the first three, and I added in here low social status or power because at the very beginning in my smart art I had put poverty. These things are all stressful because when you feel helpless, you feel like things are happening to you and there's nothing you can do about it. And helplessness is a stressor. So that's why I added that to this list. All right, so we got our catastrophes. The thing about, I mentioned catastrophes, people come help you. Part of why catastrophes are a little bit easier psychologically and physically to recover from is that most people will agree that this event was harmful, that it was overwhelming. And so you don't have that feeling of, you know, questioning yourself and your own judgment that you seem to be the only person who thinks that this is stressful and everybody else is fine, right? I mentioned hurricanes, but there are also things like earthquakes, floods of any kind, you know, being in a combat zone, wildfires sweeping through the region. These are all examples of things that can be catastrophic. It could be a single event, or it could be living in a chronically stressful situation, like living in a crowded urban center can be stressful. And some people call it, you know, the same kind of stress as a catastrophe, because ongoing you're exposed to the same thing that is, and nobody fixes it. It's kind of a region-wide, and everybody's affected by it. Everybody finds it stressful, but it doesn't really end necessarily. Some of the short-term effects, you know, people have stress-related heart attacks sometimes when these events happen. Whenever there's an earthquake, you may hear of, you know, there was minimal damage to buildings, but one person died of a heart attack. And, you know, sometimes that kind of stressor is enough to kick over something that was sort of lingering. Long-term effects, you know, people who have been exposed to catastrophes sometimes experience depression following that, or nightmares, anxiety, a little bit of post-traumatic stress kind of flashback syndrome. One of the benefits, you know, if there is one, is that, you know, after you've been through a catastrophe with other people, it forms a bond. And so now you have this little cadre of people who get you because you guys all went through this same catastrophe. So there are some pros and cons that go along with catastrophes. Major life events, changes. Got a nice, we're getting married. We're so excited. We've been looking forward to this. But, you know, even supposedly happy life changes. They bring challenge. They bring stressors. And so major life events and changes can be stressful because any change has the potential to be viewed as a challenge, right, as a threat. Um, Anytime we're having to take on a new role, anytime our priorities are shifting, anytime we have to add new tasks to our list of stuff that we do, these make it harder for us to cope. And so that's why these are stressful events. When the changes are painful, such as death, those have negative impacts on health. When the changes are in a cluster and there's just too many. I know when I first got married, my husband was still in the Coast Guard. And so we got married, and then we got transferred to a new duty station. So we moved from our home in Southern California, where I'd been raised my entire life, to the Gulf side of Central Florida. So completely on the other side of the country. Didn't know a soul. I was still a college student at the time, and so I had to find a new school and start going to college in a different place. And actually, it turned out college was one of those stabilizing factors for me. I was really lucky. I was able to get basically the same kind of job. I waitressed, and went to school. And so I had those kinds of stabilities that helped me to feel like my life was still pretty normal, even though, I had been living with my parents. I had, what I mean, like I had all these things that really significantly changed. I had a lot of stability, and that helped me to cope with it rather than to find it really threatening. I have to admit, you could tell I was under stress. The entire drive from California to Florida, I worried about things that could go wrong. The entire drive, until my poor new husband was thinking, oh, what have I gotten myself into? But I pretty much worried for like 3,000 miles. And then we got there, and pretty much everything fell into place, and it all worked. But it was very challenging. There was a lot of changes all at one time. Now, chronic daily difficulties. You have too many tasks, too little time, too little control over it. You've got mom juggling the groceries, the baby. She's obviously coming home from work or on her way to work. Just a lot of things she has to take care of. We had the other lady just buried in all of her tasks at work, right? I mean, these are the kinds of chronic things that can just make it hard. We also have, this kid living on the street, right? These kinds of things can also that's a daily difficulty, right? That's just making his life harder to live. Situations where you feel like you're lacking any kind of power or any kind of freedom are going to contribute. So these are what we call chronic daily difficulties. And these are the kind of things that are really hard to escape. I mean, how are you going to change the number of tasks you have to accomplish, or the fact that you have to play 3 roles in a day and juggle them all? I mean, how are you going to really change that? A lot of times it's really just a function of time passing. And so that makes these chronic daily hassles sort of harder to cope with than the previous 2 examples I listed. A catastrophe, we fix stuff. Have you ever noticed after a hurricane or an earthquake, really quickly, here comes everybody. I remember the Oso mudslide, which was earlier this year. I'm making this lecture in 2014. Earlier this year, they had the Oso mudslide, and of course, huge tragedy and very stressful and stuff. But it did not take very long for us to get out there like the little ants that we are and start cleaning it up. Once the recovery period was over, the work went into cleaning it up. And that's what happens with catastrophes. You get in there and you feel like you have a purpose because you're in there cleaning it up. You're getting things back in order. With chronic daily difficulties, chronic is the term here, right? It's going to keep coming back. Even if you get it cleaned up today, it's going to be back tomorrow. Like doing the laundry. On the day that you have finished folding all the laundry and put it away, you take off the clothes that you were wearing that day, throw it in the laundry basket, and the cycle starts over. It's just like that chronic daily hassle that you just really can't escape. And that makes, for maybe in certain ways, more stress than the other types that I listed. All right, let's go ahead and take a break. We'll come back in the next section and talk about how your body responds to stress.